Welcome to Her Legal Global. I'm your host, Faye Gelb, and today we're welcoming Chelsey Brooke Cole, who's here to talk to us about how to achieve massive success as an introverted professional. And I think that's something that a lot of us can relate to, and I'm excited for this topic. Welcome, Chelsey. It's really nice to have you.
It's so great to be here. Thank you for having me.
So I just want to tell you a little bit about Chelsey. She is a professional counselor and Pathfinder coach, and she helps forward-thinking introverts create clarity, confidence, and calm, the three C's, by quieting their inner critic and trusting themselves more. Her mission is to help introverts experience light bulb moments that change the way they see themselves, their abilities, and their purpose forever. So this is a pretty amazing topic. I just want to ask you a little bit, Chelsey, how did you come to have a focus on this?
Yeah, well, my journey with introversion has definitely been lifelong. We didn't have the label for introversion until a lot later, pretty recently, actually. So I grew up not knowing what I was or what that meant. And later on, I think this really led me to where I am now with this journey of self trust because I realized when you don't know yourself, it's also really hard to trust yourself. So that really started standing out to me in my own journey and then working with clients, just how much our culture focuses on extroverted ideals, our family, our school, our workplaces. They are so set up for extroverts to succeed and to be talkative, to be the outgoing one. And if you're quiet, then you're seen as shy, or you don't get promoted, or your work gets it goes unnoticed, or you get dismissed or underutilized. And so there were so many ways that I was like, wow, not only do we need to know ourselves and gain confidence through that, but also be able to trust ourselves. So I'm really excited to be able to dive into that specific topic today.
I'd like to ask you specifically about that. So what does that mean to trust ourselves, especially as an introvert? Is it, what are we looking for? What do we need to know about? Tell us about it.
Yeah, so like I was saying, confidence is kind of one of those things we understand a little easier. Self-trust is a little less defined. So I think of it, or a way that I think is helpful to just start to get familiar with it, is to think about trust in your relationships. Like, how do you know when you trust someone? Obviously, you feel safe in the relationship, you can be vulnerable with them, you don't worry that they're going to be overly judgmental or critical of you. So I think it's as simple as a definition as you can get of self-trust would be, the ability to feel safe within yourself. Like, how do you know that you can be vulnerable with yourself, that you can trust yourself, that you don't have this overwhelming inner critic that a lot of us introverts can struggle with. So it's just that knowing, or that sense of knowing who you are, your values, that you feel safe within yourself. And it's also closely tied to intuition, like being able to listen to the signs that your body and your feelings are giving you instead of staying stuck in that analytical mind.
That's an interesting concept, stuck in the analytical mind. So that basically is taking us away from really what we are really feeling inside, would you say?
I think it can. Yeah, we give so much emphasis on the rational, logical mind, or being able to, weigh the pros and cons of things. And there's definitely a time and place for that. But I think what stands out the most to me about the analytical mind, if we give it too much emphasis, is that we can get stuck in cognitive dissonance because how many of us have made decisions that we look back on and think, wow, I really shouldn't have done that, but like I was thinking it so much through, or you just got stuck in overthinking, so you just went with something to try to manage the anxiety of it. And then we start to try to justify or rationalize it. Well, it was this, it was this, it was this, and before you know it, you're so disconnected from what you really think or you really feel. And so intuition or self-trust allows, it's not susceptible to cognitive dissonance because it's not based on what's most rational. It's based on, this feels right. Like I can't necessarily explain it, but I know it. And it is based on like all of our cumulative experiences and everything that our body and feelings are giving us feedback, but we just often don't listen because we're so focused on the analytical mind and trying to be rational and logical that we dismiss, and unfortunately we overlook ourselves, what our body is trying to tell us.
So our body is basically giving us these messages all the time, and introverted people are the ones that, would you say, need to tune into this even more than an extrovert? Like we need to be able to access that energy that we have from within, because extroverts are really energized by people from outside and introverts
Mhm.
are much more internal. So I think what I'm hearing from you is that we can have a lot of chatter that's internal as well, and it's not necessarily helpful. So we have to be able to distinguish between what's going on that's helpful and what's not. Would you say that's accurate?
Yeah, definitely. And I would just add to that that I know a lot of times introverts might feel like they are more vulnerable to an inner critic. And in some ways we are because we do have a lot of internal processes going on. But at the same time, I think we're uniquely equipped to tune into our intuition because we do think so much and we have more of an inside out perspective on the world. So instead of, getting our energy from other people, we gain our energy from being in quiet and being in solitude, and we're not afraid to do that. And that is really where you can listen to your intuition and hear it even more. So again, I just think it comes back to that idea of self-trust. Like, we already are uniquely equipped to be able to tune into our intuition because we enjoy solitude and we do tend to think things through so much. We just have to learn to trust that more.
So why is it important? We've touched a little bit on that about the self-trust. Just tell me a little bit more about why self-trust should be something that introverts are really focusing on.
Yeah, well, I think it's the only way that we can really create a fulfilling life. And it's not one that's based on others' expectations or what we think we should do. We can dive into this comparison mindset and think, oh, they have it figured out. I should be like this. My life should look like this. My kids should be like this. And so we always are looking outside to determine, what the standard is, when in reality, self-trust allows you to get quiet, to breathe and just say, okay, what is important to me? What are my values? And it allows you to create an aligned life, to make choices that feel more aligned as well. I think a lot of times we end up regretting our decisions because we were trying to meet some standard, or we were trying to avoid some anxiety, or just we had a lot of pressure in the moment, so we made a choice that wasn't ultimately for our highest good. So taking that time and being able to tune into your body and make decisions from a more aligned place and where you have self-trust, I think will help us to, experience less regrets and be happier with the life that we've chosen.
So what do you think gets in the way of people being able to do this self-trust other than maybe not knowing about it, not being able to
Mhm.
tune into it? Like, what do you think is the main impediments to us being able to do this?
Yeah, well, a few things come to mind. I know one, just caring a lot about what people think. And I often say that we should care less what people think in order to care more about people. So I'm not suggesting that you never, consider how a decision will impact other people or consider what other people feel or think. But I think there's an overemphasis sometimes on how will this decision look, or what will other people think, or how will this impact everyone except you. Like, we never take the time to think, how will I feel about myself if I do this? What will I think of myself if I make this choice or go down this path? So I think that can get in the way a lot. And also taking on other people's feelings as our own. I know some people feel very guilty even for things that aren't their fault. If other people around them are unhappy, then we can struggle to differentiate between my feelings and your feelings. And while I can be there for your feelings, I don't have to take responsibility for those feelings. So those are just a couple of things that I really think get in the way of us, like you said, even knowing that we have self-trust, like knowing that we have this option. But then even when we are aware of it, really tuning into it, even those couple of things can still get in the way.
Yes, I can imagine, like, you're sitting there and you're thinking about a decision that you need to make. So, for example, maybe you want to do something on the weekend and the person that you're with doesn't necessarily want to do that. So, the thoughts that are going through your mind may not be the ones that are tapping into the self-trust. I can see how very much you would be looking at, what does the other person think? What are people going to think? That type of thing about something that you're going to be doing. So, it is to me a huge impediment. What can we do about, dealing with this? How can we look to change and tap into our self-trust? Because, when we talk about it, it seems really easy to do, but in reality, I think it's quite challenging. There's a lot of noise. So how do we decipher and streamline and get rid of that
Mhm.
noise?
Yeah, I think that's a really nice way to say it. Is there is a lot of noise. There's a lot of distractions out there. So in my work, I say that there's only really two ways that we should be making decisions. And number one is, instead of making an outside in perspective kind of decision, we should be having an inside out. So I'll explain what that means. Um, Oftentimes, like I've said, when we make decisions, we think about how it will affect everyone else or how others will see it. And so we really are thinking outside in, like, what will everyone else think? How does this look? And we never even consider, what we really want. So instead of asking what will others think, what will I think or how will I feel about myself if I make this choice? And that also allows you to be in alignment with your higher values and, things that are ultimately for your highest good, instead of just focusing on the pressures or anxieties of this current situation or this current decision. And the other way is, how do I want my future self to look back on this decision? A lot of times we make decisions and we're thinking about immediate consequences, and we do have to consider that. But I think we also have to give probably a little more weight to, how do I want my future self to look back on this decision and situation, because it gives you the distance and perspective that you need, that gets you out of the immediate pressures and anxieties, and again allows you to tap into what's for my highest good. Because right now this decision might cause some conflict or might not be well understood, or might have a little anxiety about maybe stepping out of my comfort zone. But if you think about it from a future perspective, you can ultimately know that this is something that I want to move to, even if it's going to be difficult right now. I know that in the future, like, I will be happy that I made this choice. So that also allows you to get in touch with your gut, what you know is true. But again, it can just be clouded because we're overthinking it, or we're thinking too much about what others think or the current pressures of the situation.
So you're talking about my future self looking back and saying, okay, the decision that you're making now, and just trusting what that older, wiser person that you will become would be having to be able to contribute to this particular situation. How do you find that that's an easy, accessible way to do it, though? Do you find that you can still get over the voices, that you can find that wisdom if you ask yourself that question? Are you tapping into really the self-trust by doing that?
Yeah, I think so, for a couple of reasons. A lot of self-trust is, like you said, getting out of the noise and just tuning down the distraction. So it's not like we're avoiding that our decisions, have consequences for others and that they will impact others. Of course, we consider that. But I'm saying, let's also consider the way that we feel or what we think about something, because what we're taught often from a young age is, care about other people and care about what they think and care about how this looks. And we immediately, when we go into school or work or family, we have this standard and this expectation. So we're like always looking outside of ourselves. And for introverts, this is just such a difficulty, because especially our personality hasn't necessarily been invited into the culture. Like, we always have had a little resistance and pushback. So it can be really normal for us, if we've not understood ourselves or not had anybody around us to support us. It's just so natural for us to kind of put on this extroverted facade and go out in the world and think, okay, I need to be this person to succeed at work. And then, my parents expect me to be this person. I need to be this person for my spouse. And before you know it, we're just fragments of ourselves. So these questions of, how do I think or feel about myself? Maybe we've never even considered that before. Like, maybe you spent your whole life just wondering what other people want or need from me, or how someone else will judge how I'm showing up in this situation, instead of actually thinking about, okay, what do I expect of myself? What are my values? How do I want to show up? And how do ultimately, how do I want my future self to look back on me? I want to be proud of, the direction that I'm going in. And the thinking about in a future self way also allows you, again, that distance and perspective, so that you're not just stuck in the current expectations of, the situation that you're in.
So you're stepping back in order to do this, and you're looking at what you think and what you feel as your future self, looking like how you want to think and feel as your future self is telling you that this is the way that you can do this particular action. You can take these particular steps, and it allows you to step back and not necessarily tap into the feelings of other people. I would
Mhm.
wonder, I have a question about this, and I'm very curious, your thoughts on this, but what about women in particular as, introverts? And you were talking about how we're socialized and, to look outside ourselves. Do you think that's a compounding factor for, an introvert to be a female and be navigating, especially in professions like the profession that I'm dealing with, the majority of the time is the legal profession, and I feel that it's a very male hierarchical type of system that developed long before women came into it. So it
Mhm.
definitely has an infrastructure that we're entering into, and to me, I think it's compounded by that structure and how women relate and work in it. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, that's definitely a great point. I think there is kind of a double-edged sword there. As a woman, a lot of times in the corporate America, like you already have some challenges and some vulnerabilities in a typical corporate structure, which I hope is changing and going for the better. But that compounded with being an introvert, that means that you are naturally going to, listen more than you talk and think a lot and not necessarily be the outgoing, loud personality. So not only are you a woman and everything that comes with that, but then you're an introvert, and so you're also working against those extroverted ideals. And I know especially in companies or professionals that can be a challenge. So something that I've suggested or helped people with there is in group meetings, come to the meetings prepared, have a job in the meetings. Introverts feel a lot more engaged and they can participate a lot easier. We feel a lot more comfortable if we go into a situation where, like, let's say you keep the meeting minutes or you are the person who organizes the event. It not only helps you kind of come in with a sense of presence and confidence, like I have a purpose, I know why I'm here,
Yeah.
and then it helps other people keep you top of mind as well. So there are definitely some strategies that even introverted women can use, or introverts in general, that will help them, really stand out more in the corporate area too.
So having that type of routine or structure around you allows you to function within it. I was a litigator, and I personally found it, the energy that was required for me to be a litigator it seemed to be a lot more than it would be for an extrovert. So is
Mm-hmm.
that something that your future self should be, you should be cognizant of, and you should be taking into consideration as you look at these strategies? Because to me, that's a huge question for introverts. We need a certain amount of downtime. We need a certain
Mm-hmm.
amount of energy that we can gather from the sources that are for us, which is not dealing with a lot of people all the time like an extrovert. So how do you see that aspect of it playing out?
Yeah, that is an important point. I know for me, one of the biggest ways that introversion impacts my life is the way that I structure my routine and my schedule. So I think anytime, before you take a job or choose a career, a lot of times we think of, oh, I'm interested in that subject or I could do well there, so I'll go there. But we don't think about the lifestyle and the energy that or the type of people or the environment that we might be around to do that kind of job. So I think that's definitely something to keep in mind as you are making decisions about career and job opportunities. And then just thinking about how you can kind of create or schedule in energy boosters throughout the day. So if normally you might be expected to go have lunch with other people, go have lunch with yourself, like go for a walk, sit in your car, listen to music, have ways that if you know that you're going to have a lot of like things that will take a lot of energy for you coming up in the day or the week, then make sure at night or whenever your schedule allows that you have that downtime, because you really do have to manage your energy. And for introverts, it's a real thing. Like it is a neurological real thing that we have to have those energy downtimes to be able to function and show up as our best self. So again, that comes back to trusting yourself, because you have to know that you need that and that that's okay.
So when you say these energy boosters, is it mainly just taking time for yourself to be alone? Is there anything else an introvert can do to increase basically their energy level so that they can show up as their best self and increase
Mhm.
their productivity? Anything else that you would suggest?
Yeah, I think I see that in a couple of ways. One, there is just, being by yourself, having that solitude, going out in nature. Those kinds of things are energy boosting
Sounds
because
good already.
I know. Huh. So any of those things, kinds of things can be good. And then another thing or another way that I think introverts really get their energy is by having those meaningful conversations, reading or listening to things that are energizing or inspiring. As we know, we don't really like small talk. We like to just dive right into the meat of the situation, like have meaningful conversations and talk about things that are important to us. So I think if you can both have the solitude and then also engage in things that are refreshing yet energizing, like something that inspires you or something that's meaningful to you, that's a good balance for both.
And how often do you think, I want to be very specific. So how often do you think an introvert should be trying to schedule this into their day? Is it enough to just take that lunch break by yourself, or is there, time periods that we should really be looking to put more into our day?
Mm-hmm. Great question. Yeah, I mean, It can really vary because they're also highly sensitive. They're empaths. They're introverts who are more sensitive to energy drain than other introverts. But generally, I mean, I'm taking at least an hour or so every day, whether that's just before bedtime or it's a combination of it. Ultimately, it adds up to an hour throughout the day. But I don't think we can go weeks without it. I don't even think we should go days without it. There might be a period, where you could push through for, 2 or 3 days, but still, I would really be thinking about, even little things that you can do. And like I said, this doesn't have to be big because I know a lot of times we think, I don't have like hours in a day. I don't have like a chunk of an hour to just go sit and read and journal. But do you have 10 minutes? Could you get up 10 minutes earlier and just to have a cup of coffee and just to take a breath and to journal your intentions throughout the day? Like even small things throughout the day, 5-10 minute meditations, those can all add up because instead of allowing it to build, and then we feel like we have to take a whole day or week off, if you will just take 5 or 10 minutes throughout the day, then your cup doesn't fill up quite as much. So it doesn't take as much for your cup to be empty and for you to feel refreshed again.
So basically, we could be structuring these things a lot more into our day, and then for sure they're happening, and then we're getting that energy boost that we need. So let's just take a time to go over an example. We've talked about the two different types, the thinking back as the older person, and refresh my memory on the other one.
Yeah, so how will I feel or what will I think about myself if I make
Right.
this choice?
So let's talk about a choice. Say I'm going to be in a position where I'm considering a new job, but I haven't left my old position. And as an introvert, a lot of things come to mind as this plays,
Mhm.
through. So how would I take what we've talked about today and apply it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's definitely a lot we can go into. I know any introvert who's had this situation knows how much overthinking can go into this and how many pros and cons lists we can make up, and we ultimately feel like we don't get anywhere. So again, there's a time for the pros and cons list, but let's also definitely give some time to building the self-trust. So a couple of things like just applying the questions that I had suggested there. So it would be really easy to think about in that kind of situation, how will other people look at me? Depending on how long you've been at this current job, will they think poorly of me if I leave too soon? Will they think that I'm not giving it enough chance? Will someone be disappointed or, think that this is the wrong decision for me? Or will someone else be excited? Like there's so many ways we could be thinking about how other people will view this transition and move. So again, taking a minute, taking a step back and think, okay, how will I feel or what will I think about myself?
Can I just ask you about that whole concept of what other people think? Should
Yeah.
we be taking that out right away and then bringing it back in later after we've established more of our own feelings and thoughts? Like you said, we definitely always have to consider other people. It's not like we can just do everything carte blanche.
Right.
But at the same time, it seems to me that we need to have that time period to really give ourselves more of a, you know, the focus and to be able to put the energy into ourselves about what we want in that situation.
Yeah, that's a great distinction. It's definitely more of starting with yourself first. So it's not that you never consider what other people might think or their input or get gathering opinions, but it's definitely starting with yourself. So the starting point is within your own values and what you know to be best for you, and then gathering in opinions from that instead of starting with opinions and then, of course, you're trying to mold into the opinions or expectations that you've gotten. So yeah, that's a great distinction. Is one, how will I feel or what will I think about myself in this situation? Then, of course, you can consider other people. And then,
When we talk about how will I feel about myself in this situation, could we just explore that a little bit? Does that mean that we should be looking for more of the perfectionist type of approach? Like, are we looking at ourselves in a judgmental way? Like, what kind of language should we be using around that? Because I can see that becoming quite negative very fast if we don't approach it in the right mindset.
yeah, that's a great distinction because it's definitely not a perfectionistic kind of mindset. That can just lead to more judgment and criticism, and that doesn't help. So this is really more about getting quiet, taking a moment, taking a breath, and thinking about what is most in alignment with your values. So when I say, how will I feel about myself? Basically, let's say you're at this job, will you feel like you gave it enough time, or will you feel like you were just, running from something just because it wasn't working out immediately? So just taking that reflective moment to say, okay, how will I ultimately feel about myself if I make this choice one way or the other. Like, am I still going to feel like I'm making a choice that's in my highest good, or am I really just being, pushed or pulled because of some expectation, or something from an outer perspective, basically.
One of the questions I like to talk to people about is, does it energize you? Do you think that's a helpful question that we could apply here, so that would help us distinguish between, what is draining us and what potentially could really be energizing us as we move into the future?
Yeah, definitely. Because anxiety, thinking of like energizing versus anxious. I know sometimes we think that a certain thing is energizing us, but maybe it's really just the anxiety of wanting to get out of this current situation, or we're being pushed because we want to avoid some kind of fear. So thinking about what feels better, what feels like a higher, lighter, part of you. If this new job is really bringing out something where you, like you said, you're excited, you're inspired, it motivates you. In this current job, you're kind of anxious about leaving because maybe there's been a few things that you don't really like, but it's familiar and it feels safe. So there's a big difference there on energy of, okay, I feel kind of heavy, but this is familiar here, versus I feel lighter and more energized. It's unknown, it's unfamiliar, but I feel like my energy would be better over there. So that's definitely a different way you could look at it.
And is there anything else that you would add about this process that we're just talking about now?
Yeah, just going back to the second question of, how do I want my future self to look back on this situation? And realizing that what's best for you right now doesn't necessarily have to be best for you forever. Like, a lot of times we see decisions in, black and white, right or wrong. And while some decisions certainly have long-term consequences, we can get stuck because we can think, okay, if I make this job change, like, that's it, like, this is gonna, but that's not necessarily the case. It could be that you decide right now, I think I want to give this job, some more time. And 3 months from now, you're like, I've seen more concerning things here. Now it's not the best choice for me to stay. So knowing that you can be flexible, that you can be creative, a certain decision doesn't have to be the end all be all forever. You can make choices as long as you can, get in alignment with yourself and take a moment to quiet at each step of the way. Then you can know that you are following the next best step for you.
I think that's such an excellent point about getting quiet, because if you allow yourself to get into that quiet space, then you can really tune in to that future
Mm-hmm.
self and be able to really hear what that person has to say to you. Because, without the noise and all that other thing that's going on, there is a lot of wisdom in ourselves as we, experience life, but we often just shut it off. And as you say, tune into what everybody else around us is wanting or thinking that people want from us. I think that's another big pitfall that a lot of people get into, is they think they know what people want, and they,
Mm-hmm.
complicate their lives by saying that. So, what do you think would be the expected results if we were able to implement this type of
Mm-hmm.
approach?
Well, I think number one, you're going to be clear on your values and your priorities. If you take a moment to get quiet, to tune into yourself first and take more of an inside out perspective, then you're going to feel more confident that the choices you're making are more in alignment with what you believe to be, in for your highest good. I also think that you'll have less anxiety in general around what people think, and you'll feel less, like you said, you'll feel less impacted by the noise, and kind of like, we can feel like we're just in a tornado and of chaos, and we're pulled in so many different directions. And there's so much of an energy drain thinking about how every person will view a certain situation or view a decision. So, really starting from this inside out perspective and thinking, okay, let me first get quiet, think about my values, think about my priorities, think about where I ultimately want to be in the future, and how I can live in most alignment with that. I think that's going to open up a lot more easier way to make choices, and tend to create really a more fulfilling life.
So when we talk about the values, though, should we be taking a moment to define those values before we start this process, and really being sure? Because values can be a lot of different things. Like being alone can be a
Mm-hmm.
value. So especially as an introvert, you might want to have that one up there big time, so that you can then structure and reflect on the different choices that you're making, so that they incorporate that being alone. I think there's been a lot of negativity about introverts and a lot of confusion. Oh, they're shy, or they're this or they're that, when it's, as you said, neurologically, we actually need that downtime. So recognizing that as one of our values is really putting the self trust right at the forefront, and then incorporating that into whatever career or whatever life decisions that we're making. Would you say that would be a good place to start?
Yes, definitely. That's a great point. Getting clear on not only what your values are individually, but thinking about your personality. And I know values can be kind of tricky. We can wonder, okay, they seem so conceptual. Like, how do you really know what your values are? And so, one of the ways that I think that's actually clear, or one of the reasons we struggle with, is because we're too close to the situation. So, if you imagine that, in this case, taking an outside in perspective can be helpful. So, I say, imagine that you're someone else and you're looking at how you spend your time and what you base your decisions off of can give you a clear estimation of that. Because you may think you value work or career or family or independence or whatever, but do your behaviors say that? Do the way that you spend your time say that? And so taking a moment for sure to list out how I spend my time and what I base decisions off of can really be helpful as well. Are you basing them on what other people think or meeting other people's expectations, or based on your internal compass, based on what you think is best for your family? There's so many ways you can go with that, but looking at it from that perspective can help you first get clear on what your values are right now, or at least what your behaviors say your values are, and then
Right.
consider if that's really how you want to structure your life going forward.
I really love that, the behavior and how you spend your time. That's really
Mhm.
telling. I think that really gives you a big clue to go forward. So, Chelsey, how can people get a hold of you and learn more about your process?
Yeah, for sure. Well, I'm on every social media platform: Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Pinterest at Chelsey Brooke Cole. You can find me on Twitter at Chelsey B. Cole. And then for anyone who, really resonated with the topics that we're talking about today, a lot of times it's great to hear it, but then we go away and we never actually apply it. So I created a cheat sheet so people can really apply these actions in their life. You can find that at the link at the bottom, which is bit.ly/cheat sheet -clarity, or you can go to chelseybrookecole.com/cheat sheet.
Wonderful. It's been great to have you, Chelsey. Thank you very much. I've learned a lot about being an introvert, even though I am one, and this has been really invaluable. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It was so much fun.